We're the Sherry family, and we are ambassadors for the 2021 Gala to raise awareness about mental health in our community.
Our journey started about 14 years ago when we lost our husband and father to suicide on January 31st, 2007. If you knew Brian, you would never know that he suffered from anxiety and depression. He was always the guy that wanted to joke with you and tell a funny story. He liked to tease, get you to laugh. Most of our family members and friends had no idea, and even the kids had no idea. He had been on medication for about 10 years before he committed suicide. He had lost his job in the fall of 2007. He'd worked for someone for close to 20 years, and he lost his job that fall. It really bothered him a lot. I'm sure he worried about providing for his family. About mid-January of 2007, he came to me and he said, I need to do something different. I need to see a doctor. He went to his primary physician, and the doctor, upped his medication. And then about a week later, Brian told me that this was no longer working. He needed to see the doctor again. So we went to see the doctor, and at that point, the doctor and Brian made the decision for him to enter St. Francis mental health ward. And so he stayed there about a week, not quite a week, and he was released. And 2 days later, he ended his life.
It takes you by shock, especially for us kids, because like my mom just said, our dad was definitely someone that was happy-go-lucky type of person, hardworking, that I would have never guessed. And even the day we came home from school that he was at St. Francis, it was kind of hard to think about for that next week. And then when it happened, it was just like, this feels like a bad dream, that it was too much of a rush. We were lucky enough that we had good family and friends that helped us through it. Those were probably our therapists. So there wasn't necessarily resources in the community that I knew about, or maybe we knew about, to help us through it, but we were lucky enough that there were good people around us that kept us going.
Back 14 years ago, I felt like mental illness, depression, anxiety, especially suicide, was not talked about. It was hush-hush. It was not something that people felt comfortable talking about. And I know when my dad committed suicide, I felt like we couldn't talk about it. Not from my family, but just in general, people didn't feel comfortable talking to me about it. And I know even a few years later, people would find out that my dad had passed away, and they would naturally ask the question, what happened? And there was part of me that, even though I wasn't ashamed of it, even though I was so proud of him, it was hard for me to say those words, he committed suicide. He took his own life. And when I did say that out loud, I felt like people were taken aback. They were uncomfortable with me speaking those words out loud. And, people just don't know what to say when something like that happens. And not that I blame them. There aren't the right words to say about something like that. But I feel like, especially in the past few years, there's been such a push on social media, or just in general, that people are opening up more about mental illness and their own struggles. And we're realizing that it's much more common than people had originally thought, or that because people just aren't willing to share their own struggle, whether it be because they're ashamed or they don't feel like people will respond appropriately when they, take that step and have that courage to say, hey, I struggle with this. Or, one of my family members committed suicide. There hadn't been that kind of openness about it. And there's been a real push in the last few years to open up and normalize the talk around mental illness and mental health. And I think that's phenomenal, because when we support each other and we're open and honest, we realize that a lot of people struggle with mental illness, whether it's for a short time or for their entire life. It affects almost all of us.
So I think a big reason why our family wanted to be a part of this is those moments that we don't have anymore with our dad. If it was, graduation or going to college, getting married, having kids, seeing him play with his grandkids, it's those things that all of us wish he was still here. And so if we can do whatever we can for this community so that nobody else has to go through those, we want to do as much as we can. I think this is something that really needs to start when we're young. I mean, little kids deal with anxiety, and to learn how to cope with that, even through the small things in life as a child, hopefully that will help as you get older and those stresses become larger, that they understand how to deal with it. Hopefully at a young age they can find someone that they can confide in and talk with. And if not, then hopefully there's resources in the community that people can go to and really open up and talk about this stuff, because it definitely needs to be done.